أصبح الزواج كارثة من الكوارث. أصبح الآن أغلب الشباب لديه هاجس يسكنه وخوف يقلقه حينما يقدم على الزواج. عند أهل الزوج يطلبون مهر عالي مرتفع، يطلبون ذهب، يطلبون لازم فندق. الآن للأسف الشيء يقول لازم تحط الزواج في فندق. سبحان الله العظيم، متى كانت الفنادق؟ أنت يا أبو البنت هذه، أنت تزوجت في فندق؟ وأنت يا أم البنت أسألك بالله، أنت رحتي فندق؟ كيف تزوجتي؟ فاتقوا الله يا جماعة الخير، خاف الله عز وجل في الشباب. ليس لازما، يعني حضرنا قبل أيام زواج اللهم بارك، زواج عائلي مختصر جميل، وأصحابه والله قادرون أن يأخذوا أكثر من فندق، لكنهم يخافون الله عز وجل، ولا يريدون أن يكونوا قدوات سيئة للآخرين ومثال سيء للآخرين، وإنما تواضعوا، وهذه البركة تحصل هنا البركة.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, the Noble Sheikh had some points to discuss with us on marriage and how the young men apparently are in fear. Now, this could be an older clip, but it still rings true, at least in America, where there's a lot of pressure on people to have a big wedding. And I recall there was a conservative influencer not too long ago who got married. She showed her engagement ring though, and a lot of women teased her about the size of the ring and said it wouldn't even be worth marrying a guy who couldn't afford a ring that was bigger than that. And like they were trolling each other, and it was like this big thing on trad Christian women Twitter, X rather, and I followed the tirade and stuff, and I made a video on my main channel about how you don't need a Disney wedding. Now, a lot of women do think that they are owed this Disney wedding, and it's a day where they get to feel like a queen. And I'd argue that women judge each other heavily. And there have been some comments made by people in the manosphere and Red Pill that, you know, the white dress was originally for virgins on their wedding day. Now you have women who they have had 20, 50 partners, and they are wearing a white dress, and they're getting the wedding treatment of a woman who would have been more preserved on her wedding day, shall we say. And the whole history of weddings, how it's done, the culture, is a fantastic thing when you look at it sociologically, anthropologically. But take a step back and realize the Islamic view, and that you get married and then intimacy becomes halal. You get to have children in a halal way. And it makes me think about this kid's cartoon. It was called Pebble and the Penguin. And the female main character penguin says, "It's not about the pebble, it's about the penguin." And it's one of those older cartoons like where there's a lot of singing and stuff, but there's kind of a dopey main character penguin who finds this very shiny stone, and he wants to give that to her as like sort of like it's like their version of an engagement ring. And he keeps holding on to the pebble the whole time, and eventually gets the girl, and I won't spoil it for you. But with that line of, it's not about the pebble, it's about the penguin, one could argue it's not about the ring, it's about the man. Now, I'm more minimalistic. I didn't ask for a ring. I didn't want a ring. I think that it's dangerous to have a ring. Why? Because when you're in a zone where a lot of people are struggling to pay their bills and where chain snatching occurs, I don't think it's a great idea. I really don't. And some people may call that dystopian. I call that survival instincts. What do I mean by that is, if you wear a fancy ring, it's really easy for someone just to put a weapon to your head and steal it. or just for 3 people to surround you, intimidate you, and take it. I still think about this video where a woman from India was wearing that beautiful Indian gold. We call it Indian gold. I'm not sure if that's the jeweler's term for it, but it's a particular shade of yellowish, and it's beautiful, especially against those Indian women's skin. And a guy just goes up to her and he starts yanking the chain off of her neck, and she's holding on to her stroller. And he's just yanks it off. She falls on the ground and he runs off. And the violent struggle made me think about that scene where Tyrion uses the gold chains to choke out his former mistress, who was in bed with his father, before he puts the crossbow arrows into his father while he's on the chamber pot. And, you know, you can get choked out by your own gold because a thief is trying to take it. A ring, I always looked at it weird when we servers would work with our hands, and a woman would wear her engagement ring, and it was, some of them you're like, it's pretty awkward to wear at work because a stone could fall out, it's getting dirty, it's getting raw chicken on it. You know, everyone here knows that you're actually at the bottom, very close to the bottom of the pyramid due to where you're working. But there's this almost cognitive dissonance where people think, well, people won't look at me as I'm poor if I wear my jewelry. I always thought that's weird. It's like, you're at a job where we sell food and breakfast items. You're not taking home more than $300 a day in tips. And we're paying taxes on those tips. You're not fooling the customers who have, on average, more cash than the workers. And some women, they will twiggle and twinkle their little hands to kind of jiggle around their ring to kind of flex on you if you're not wearing one, and be like, look at, my husband got me this ring. And for me, it's just more performative. Hollywood kind of put that in, the whole diamond industry as well. Now, it's wonderful to get gifts, can be romantic, but you're not marrying the man for what he can buy you necessarily. Don't get me wrong, you want a provider, but it's more important that you pick a guy who's going to be a safe dad, who's sober, who has emotional regulation, as in when he's angry, he's not going to take it out on you and the children. He's responsible, goes to work on time. There's so many other more important factors than how much he's willing to throw down on a wedding. And I've mentioned this before. A lot of the people who go to weddings are just gossiping, they're judging you, and the amount of weddings I've been to, and the amount of snarky, just Medusa women, it turned me off to even having anyone at a wedding, like, because at that time I wasn't married, and when I got married, it was just me and my husband, because I used to think that marriage was just a piece of paper, and I considered myself married, even though I hadn't, signed anything, because I was of that Joe Rogan mindset for so long where, oh, you don't really need legal stuff. But then, turns out in America, when you are on paper, there's more legitimacy and legality and maturity, so might as well go ahead and sign that way as well. But I had you have to have a witness, so someone has to witness it, and it was at the Civic Center, and I had the person there who was a friend of my husband and his wife, and if they weren't there, it wouldn't have mattered. There wasn't anyone who I really cared about being there. Maybe you can think that's antisocial, backwards, isolationist, but no one really cares about your wedding day except for your like most precious loved ones. I think a lot of people go into debt for weddings are not very smart, because you could save that money, especially in this economy, which is getting worse and worse. The amount people spend on food and a stupid dress, you know, I get it, but it's that Disney mindset of we got to spend all this cash, and if we don't, we'll be judged. Absurd. Now, he mentioned the elevated high dowry. Now, there are some men who are like, oh, I'll just give you this small item. You know, and you see this in the muta marriages, which are haram in Islam. But I think you got to be real careful. They say they want you to have a cheap mar, a dowry, but then when you see women who do, they're like, there's a stigma attached to it. Where if you have a low mar, like a McDonald's meal, like you're basically like a prostitute. You know. But then again, in America we don't do dowries really. And some people, they just go get married in Las Vegas with some guy who's dressed up as Elvis. Or they just get married down at the little church. But one could argue that the dowry is the man's family helping to pay for, you know, all the amenities and stuff. There's a lot of angles you could tackle the marriage conversation, and then you go around the world and see how marriage is done. And then you look at what's permissible in Islam, you're like, okay, you know. But I do enjoy the fact that Islam encourages segregation even during weddings. And I think that's very good for the man and the woman. And I mention that because in America, if you even notice in movies, the bridesmaids are like looked upon as like, okay, which one of the groomsmen is gonna smash with them? And they get drunk, they all enter into debauchery behavior. It's really quite sad how many weddings actually turn sexual once the alcohols hit the bloodstream. So they're not very spiritual affairs, but there's a lot of drinking, partying, open bar, people crying, like someone got into a fight, auntie doesn't want to sit next to so-and-so, just petty drama. And I always thought it was weird, the bride and the groom are on the dance floor and we all got to stand around and watch them. I don't want to watch this. You know, I didn't come here to watch you dance. Like, the only beautiful scene, I think, of a wedding, which kind of made me tear up, was when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry married, just because that's so lavish. But they're royals, so you're like, you know, how long? I'll never probably, how can I say it? It's not every day you see a royal wedding, but it is a little bit pretty, you know, her dress and everything, and I'm like, oh. But the average wedding, I was like, no, you know, especially celebrity weddings, like, they're gonna break up in 2 years. I just like that because it was an actual royal wedding in our lifetime, and I think there's a little bit of pageantry that can be permissible at times. But, you know, it's a form of history, one could argue. I've never seen an American president get married, right? Imagine that. If we saw, like, the president of the United States get married, usually people want to vote for someone who is already married. But it would be interesting to see. Imagine you had a female president who wasn't married, and she was able to, you know, get married in front of the masses and stuff. Interesting. It would be televised. Interesting. But it's kind of like a throwback to the old days. So it's more understandable, shall we say, when a royal does it. But the average woman who's making less than $80,000 a year, trying to go into debt, paying interest on that debt to try to flex on other women like, I'm not actually poor, is a waste of time. Because we know you're poor. We know where you live. This whole fake it till you make it, like, don't look poor but you are poor, chameleon mindset that a lot of Americans have, is not healthy at all. And he mentioned that they request gold in a hotel. That must be like an Arab thing. Because giving gold, that's usually for preppers, you know, libertarians who think the economy is going to collapse. And then he just mentioned brevity. And when you think of brevity in the situation of marriage, it's important. Brevity and briefness. Don't extend the wedding forever. Don't ask too much of your guests. I mean, I got a low social battery. I don't know about you, but you got about an hour, 2 hours, and then I want to go home. I'm not trying to be all day with these lavish, elaborate, pretentious weddings. And the forced smiling is like hell. Where you have to constantly be in a cheerful, joyful mood in order to make the bride not cry. To make her feel very, very special. It's exhausting. Okay? And just so that she can have this cinematic view in her head. And I do recall there was a study that mentioned that the more you spend on your wedding, they detected a pattern of the higher rates of divorce. And that says something. But you know what's also interesting? As a mom, I want my daughters to have a special day, but I would never tell them that you need to have, like, we need to rent this lavish spot and, like, pretend we're all, like, fashionistas at Mar-a-Lago or something bizarre. No. In fact, there's lots of little cute, they're like wedding areas by, like, redwood forests. I'm not going to give exact locations. But throughout California, there's scenic places where you can get married and have your little family gather. And I think that's really cute. And then if you can afford it, it's nice. Like getting married by the ocean. You know, imagine you have the sheikh there signing it or whatnot. You have just that little moment of your immediate family and their immediate family. And then, you know, as a parent, you witness this sort of handing off of your daughter to go start her life as a wife and mother, inshallah. And then you see the view of the ocean. Like, that's really nice. Away from society, right? I mean, there's been countless women who go to Italy and then they're like in their dress and they're standing by the fountain and there's tourists all around them. It's a bit showboaty. I'd say a bit arrogant. I don't know. We ain't trying to be like Jeff Bezos and his woman. But I think that there can be opportunities in nature that can provide you a special experience. But I'd also think, on a darker, more cynical note, the more lavish the wedding, upon your divorce, I think the more pain you're gonna have. The fancier you make your wedding, it's like the more you're asking for heartache later. Because the more you invest emotionally and financially into the relationship and then it goes sour, the pain is going to be deeper, I'd argue. The pinch is worse because you spent a lot of cash, time, and everyone witnessed your wedding. Now everyone's witnessing your divorce. You know? Something to say there. So I agree that it should be brief. But I understand why some women, in their head, they're like, I'm expected to be with this guy forever. Even though that's not the case, they often get divorced. But they expect, like, okay, I'm going to be stuck with this one guy. Might as well make the chain and ball ceremony worth it. Because now I'm going to just have to wake up every day to the same person and deal with them So I might as well have a shebang before you go into the chains of monotony and monogamy. Some men and women think this way, which is why they have a bachelor and a bachelorette party where lots of sin happens. I never understood that ritual in America. It's very popular amongst the boomers. The women, like, they have a male stripper and then the men have a female stripper. They're all drinking, and those limousine buses, shuttles, they're on there, and there's just strippers inside. Your husband is getting a woman's grinding on him. I just, American weddings are something to behold. Let's put it that way. There's so many different niches, and that is pushed on young girls from a very young age. And it's pushed on them as well if you take them to these lavish wedding ceremonies. And that movie Succession, TV series on HBO, Succession, when the daughter Shiv gets married, a wedding like that seems so like a nightmare. Because it's a business thing. Like, you have to invite all these people, and your dad's there, he's a big shot, and there's all this drama, and I couldn't imagine having that many people at your wedding. And it's selfish, egotistical, but there's a ton of women who dream of having something like that. And if a man can give that to them, they sometimes will pick that guy over the simple one who might give them a more personal ceremony, but with lots more love. It's really gross. Oops. It would be interesting to actually go through movies and analyze the wedding scenes. Let's see the most popular. Even The Godfather. The Godfather, that whole ceremony is absurd. Everyone's coming and giving the daughter cash. They're asking the father for favors. Think about that. That's also a piece of propaganda. In Scarface, they get married, and then Tony Montana takes his woman down, and there's a tiger. He's like chained up by the palm tree. So it's like, whoa. Women are very impressionable when it comes to lavish weddings. I mean, we can't forget Disney's role in that. Disney weddings. Just look at Cinderella. Oh, she was poor, having to clean for her evil stepmom and evil stepsisters, and her good dad died, and oh, now she gets to marry a prince and be in a lavish castle. You think of Belle. If she would have married Gaston, he had some status and wealth, but she chose the Beast, who had a castle. Something to think about. There's a lot of that in society, and quite frankly, many will judge you if you elope and have, like, just you and the guy get married and you don't have anyone there. A lot of people would judge you, but at the end of the day, the marriage is between just you two. You're both pledging to each other. The fear that young men have is sad. But if you chase the most beautiful women have a leverage, and you're asking for it. You really are. If you get a mid who's more, mellow, loves you extensively, she's crazy about you, that'd be the better option, because she'll take what she can get. If you go after the distant, cold ice queen who's a bombshell, well, she has a lot of suitors, and she can leverage her beauty. So, you have to think about that. And I understand if a really good girl who's raised in religion and she's bashful, shy, pious, been raised really well. She wants a little special thing. Okay, but at the end of the day, the marriage should be between you two, and just a sort of pledging of souls when you think about it. And understanding your rights to each other, the hard road ahead, and what it's gonna mean. Truly. I think also, if you've been divorced previously and then you get married again, I think you, as of all people, should realize the wedding doesn't matter as much. And the wedding being elaborate isn't a guarantee that the marriage will work. So why are you demanding the man fork out all this cash? Some will call me a pick-misha. I'm more of a minimalist. I understand some men will abuse that minimalism for other women who are single and whatnot. But I think there's a classy, sophisticated, spiritual way to be minimalistic. And remember, the goal is to get young, you're younger, on the younger side, like 18, 19, whatever, and you want to get married. That helps protect your private parts. And marriage serves as a way of helping to reduce haram. And each person's gonna have a scenario that works for them. And some people can get married and spend less, and then they have a lot of family support. Other people, they may not come from good families and they get married and it's just them. Some women, they can afford to marry someone with less money because they have a good dad, they have brothers. But some women who don't have anyone, they may be more full of anxiety and want to marry someone who seems more stable and ready to provide financially. Other women, they may hold out for a man who has a little bit more money because they have children from a previous marriage who they want to make sure don't go hungry, and they want to make sure they can keep their health insurance. Again, there's context to everyone's condition. But this noble sheikh is just reminding us how having absurdly high dowries, requesting gold and elaborate hotel ceremonies is pretentious, it's not necessary, and you're putting an undue burden on the lad. But as moms, we have to help our sons. And I think one brutal truth is, if the woman likes you enough, she would marry you in a cardboard box. When the woman doesn't like you as much, she's going to put a lot more loops. I'm not saying a woman cannot have standards with the man she wants to marry, but there are some women who put too many obstacles in the way, and they're not really worth it. But deep self-reflection isn't common these days, so you do have quite delusional people who overestimate their value, and then there are some women who underestimate their value as well. So talking to your friend, helping them be reasonable, making sure the guy is not trying to take advantage of them, no McDonald's meal, weddings, nikahs, helping them to avoid no-string nikahs, stuff like that can really help to put less anxiety in the women and then keep men honest, I'd argue. Let me know what you think. Weddings are a very personal conversation, and some people do not enjoy having them. They get quite defensive as well. But I think it's a healthy exercise when you say to yourself, how do I prefer to get married? How would my son or daughter prefer to get married? What's possible? And how can you make it memorable without breaking the bank? And then reminding ourselves the Islamic purpose of marriage in the first place, and how we can effectively communicate that to our children without making them feel like they can't have a special day. I covered the billionaire of India and Jeff Bezos' wedding, and I just found that to be a complete disaster in terms of public decadence displays, because the sheer volume of people who are struggling and the fact that you would waste that kind of cash just to have a selfish ceremony is weird to me. I just don't know how you can sleep at night. I don't know how much those individuals donate to charity exactly, but that type of ostentatious wealth just reminds me that we'll be held accountable on Judgment Day for how we spent our money. We will. And we have to be very cautious, because we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And women should work on jealousy and the evil eye and being judgmental towards women who choose to have a minimalistic ceremony. You know, it's important for us to stay grounded and aware. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and join the blog.